Welcome back. You have now entered Lecture 3 of Chapter 1, where we just go over a whole lot of terminology and some anatomy. That is standard vocabulary in anatomy and physiology. We try to keep the language standard so that way we all know what's being said in terms of orientation and that sort of thing. So, I kind of wing these things when I do them, because that's what I do, but we are, gonna just dive in. Oh, or not. Okay, and how come that's not opening? Here we go. So when guess what I didn't mute? Let me mute that right now. This is what happens when you try to do a recording and your husband is also around. All right, it's muted now. My bad. All right, let's get moving. So you've already had 2 lectures on this material. One was just kind of talking about anatomy and physiology, the different body systems, the different life processes. We've seen all that. And then we talked about homeostasis. We've defined it. We talked about how the body maintains it mostly through negative feedback processes. Also went over some positive feedback process. Those are very rare. Okay, and we left off on your basic anatomical terminology, but I don't want to start with that. I want to start, I don't want to start with that. I'm going to start with body cavities, and, let's start with planes and sections. All right, so let me go into PowerPoint mode. So if we take the body as we know it, and we're doing some slicing and dicing, however you want to do it, there's 3 main sections. I guess there's 1, 2, 3, 5 different ones we're going to talk about quickly. There's, and that's kind of how we slice and dice it. And when we slice and dice it, how do we cut the body, the fruit, the whatever? So as we have here, if we have this lovely young lady kind of shifted off looking to the side, if we slice her right in the middle so that we cut her into a top and a bottom, okay? So if it's a top and a bottom, that is a transverse plane. So transverse cuts you into a top and a bottom. Just like cutting you right across the middle. Do-ish, right there. If we cut her into a front and a back, my handwriting is horrible. Nope. And I just have to yell at the computer. If I cut her into a front and a back, that is a frontal plane. Okay, and if we cut this young lady down the middle, but we cut her into a left and a right, if we cut her right in the middle, it's a mid-sagittal plane, so that's into a left and a right. If we cut her slightly off-center, not in the middle, that's a parasagittal. Alright, so not in the middle is parasagittal. So our main ones are transverse, which cuts you into a top and a bottom. So it might be like, hey, give me a transverse section of that kidney. Okay. You cut it into a top and a bottom. Based on the anatomical position, which I'm not sure that I told you that. We'll come back to that one. If somebody is she's actually standing in the anatomical position. Gosh, where is that one? And maybe it's the first one. Yeah, it's the first slide. I guess I should have talked about this. So, when we're talking about slicing and dicing and body positions and directional terms and blah, 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 it is assumed that this individual or creature or whatnot is in the anatomical position, so that we can be precise and consistent in what we're saying, our references. So the definition of the anatomical position is, for us, because it's human anatomy and physiology, the person is standing upright, they're standing erect, they're facing you, the observer, Their upper arms are at the sides with the palms turned outward, turned to the front. And the feet are flat on the floor, about hip distance apart. That is the anatomical position. Like I said, I guess I should have looked at this before I started yammering. I didn't, because it doesn't change. Okay, so this, if you are somebody who does yoga, although now I'm changing yoga DVDs, a slightly different definition, this is kind of like the mountain pose. Some of them have your feet slightly apart, other ones have your feet together, but they're flat on the floor, palms facing forward, and you're standing upright with your shoulders back. I used to get whacked on the head, stand up straight, growing up, so that was in that regard. All right, so this female here is in the anatomical position, facing forward, right? She's facing forward. Her feet are facing forward, so they're not cockeyed, and they're slightly apart. Her palms are down at her sides with the palms facing forward, and that is because in your forearm you have two bones, and if your palms are forward, those bones are parallel. If your palms were twisted around to the back, then those bones cross over. So that is the anatomical position. Facing forward, feet slightly apart, body erect, palms down at your sides, palms facing forward as well. Okay, all of these lovely little regional terms you're going to go through in lab, and I'm not going to read them to you. They're pretty straightforward. Just go through them to, start understanding, axillary is your armpit, brachial is your arm, antecubital is the inside of your elbow, and blah, 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 blah. Didn't I just say I wasn't going to read them to you? And here I am reading them. All right, so now let's go into the slicing and dicing. So, because if somebody's in the anatomical position and I cut them into a top and a bottom, that was a transverse section. If I cut them into a front and a back, that is a frontal. The frontal also has another name to it, a coronal section. Coronal is also the same, where you are slicing and dicing into a front and back. And then sagittal is cutting somebody into a left and a right. So you can have mid-sagittal words in the middle, parasagittal words not in the middle. And then the last plane you have is oblique. An oblique, you guys always seem to like this one, is when you do some sort of diagonal slice. Diagonal section, I guess. Slice seems kind of gruesome. Okay, so here we took a brain and we cut it into a left and a right in the middle. So that was a mid-sagittal section. If we cut it into a front and a back, that was a frontal section. And then if we cut it into a top and a bottom, that was a transverse section. And then, of course, if it was like diagonal, that would have been oblique. All right. So like I said, this is just a whole lot of vocabulary, and, I don't know. I guess it's okay. Body cavities are also cool. I know I'm going to go back to those directional terms, but let's just do it now, right? Okay. So directional terms, a whole nother slew of vocabulary, are in pairs. So they're kind of like opposites. So I can have, let's just circle this set right here. So I have medial and lateral. I have superior and inferior. Oh, you can see I can't. I have proximal and distal. Oh, I have a bunch more as well that aren't on here. But what directional terms are used for you to describe something, but it's relative to something else. So let's go with this pair right here. So there's this word medial. And medial means more to the midline. Lateral means more to the side. So you're like, okay, fine, but this makes no sense because that's how I would be feeling. You know, it would be like the medial aspect of somebody's eye or something, you know, I mean, with how people talk. Roger had polyps in his large intestine at the distal end of the transverse colon, you know, so I mean these words are actually used in reports and maybe you'll see them, maybe you won't, so let's just understand them a little bit. So what this would say is how you do it is like the nose is medial to the ears, okay? So what that's saying hopefully is that your nose is more toward the middle than your ears. Flip it around. The ears are lateral to the nose. Oops, I'm trying to find my little thing. Ears are, and we're going to play with these in the lab section. To nose. Okay, so lateral means more to the side. Medial means more to the middle. Okay, you have superior. Superior means more upward. Oh, that looks lovely. Let me erase that line, that's horrible. Oops, that's all right. See, if you press this pen just so, you get these other menus. Superior means upward, inferior means like downward or below. No, oh, sucker. See, ugh. Well, where were we? We're on this guy, huh? I'll get better, maybe. Okay. The problem is that I'm at a big fat angle on my wrist. No. Okay, so that's what inferior means. So that would be like, my pelvis is inferior to my head, right? Pelvis inferior. See, these are all questions I would be asking you guys. Hey, what would be something that's superior? My shoulders could be superior to my belly button. Okay. Or just flip that other sentence around. Right, so that's another pair. So we have medial and lateral, we have superior and inferior. We have proximal and distal, and they're the hardest ones. So proximal and distal pertain to appendages. Okay, appendages is a fancy word for saying arms and legs. And proximal means that it is closer to the point of attachment. Either your shoulder or your pelvis. Right? Ooh. Right? Proximal, proximate, closer. Distal means that you're further away. Ooh. From point of attachment. Attachment, and again, these are only for arms and legs. Sucker. Let me go back. Okay. Stop. All right, you get what I'm trying to write. I'm giving up on it. Further away from point of attachment. So this is like saying my elbow is closer to the point of attachment than my wrist. Okay, so my elbow is proximal to my wrist. Wrist is distal to elbow. Okay. Knee is proximal to toes. Knee is closer to the point of attachment, closer to my hip than my toes. Knee is proximal to toes. Toes are distal to knee. And I'm sure when I see you guys on Friday, we're going to revisit those ones. All right, so we have superior, inferior. We did medial and lateral. No, hey, there's ipsa, intermediate. We did proximal and distal. So what we have left to talk about are anterior and posterior. Anterior means toward the front. Posterior means toward the back. So my mouth is anterior to my spine. My mouth is toward the front. My spine is posterior to my sternum. Sternum is your breastbone. and your rib cage in the middle. Okay, so that's front and back. Now we also kind of have, oh, it was already here, ventral and dorsal, because we are two-legged animals. So ventral is also belly, but belly is toward the front, and dorsal, like the dorsal fin on a shark, is to the back. So you can use ventral and dorsal, you can use anterior and posterior. I don't care which one you use. Because we're a two-legged animal that stands up, they mean the same. And we have this guy, superficial means closer to the surface, and deep means deeper into the body. Oh, look, there's even an example. So the ribs are superficial to the lungs because the ribs are on the outside of the lungs. You go deeper. Lungs are deep to the ribs. So the ribs are also deep because what's on the outside of the ribs is skin and some muscle. Let's just go with skin. So ribs are deep to the skin. Skin is superficial to the ribs, superficial to, muscle, all sorts of stuff. And then the other two words that we have are ipsilateral, meaning that it's on the same side as something else, right? I don't like that one. Ipsilateral means like if you hit somebody's kneecap and that same knee kicks out, right, as a reflex, that's ipsilateral. The response is just on the one side. Contralateral means that it's on the opposite side from another structure. So with this one, you have a colon that goes up, across, and down. So up is ascending, transverse, and then descending. So this is saying the ascending and the descending, because they're on opposite sides of the body, they are contralateral. You have a contralateral response with some of your reflexes, and we'll talk about later on with the eyes, and some crossed extensor reflexes where two different sides react two different ways, that sort of thing. But that's to come. All right. So this vocabulary is important. We will be revisiting it in lab. These planes and sections are also important. We will be revisiting them in the lab material. Now we get to body cavities, and body cavities are cool. And it's like we just kind of specialize. So we start with the dorsal body cavity. That's why it's yellow. I want to see something before I write it down. Okay. All right. Pooh. All right. So we start with the dorsal body cavity, and that consists of the cranial cavity, which has your brain, and then the vertebral cavity, which has your spinal cord and the vertebrae, right? So that's dorsal. And then we have the ventral body cavity, and ventral meaning belly, meaning anterior-ish. Ventral has the thoracic body cavity, and that's why those are blue. So the thoracic body cavity and the abdominal body cavity. Let me just write this in. And then the pelvic body cavity. All right. And those are your ventral body cavities, and you'll be seeing that vocabulary in the lab, right? So when I'm talking about the dorsal body cavity, the cranial one, like I said, is your skull, and it contains your brain. And then the vertebral one along your back, because dorsal meant back or posterior, has your spinal cord, all right? So it's just those two. So then all of this sort of fun that's in the anterior view, the front, because we just, what? No, stop yelling at me. You see how much fun I have? Hold the phone. I'm trying to, yeah, well, we'll get through it. Okay, so front was anterior. You have the thoracic cavity, and the thoracic cavity is your chest cavity contained by the ribs, and it has your lungs in a pleural cavity. It has your heart in a pericardial cavity, and then you have the mediastinum, which is just a region. Now, there is this big flat sheet of muscle between the thoracic cavity and the abdominal pelvic cavity, and that flat sheet of muscle separates thoracic from abdominal pelvic, and it is called the diaphragm. So the diaphragm is a big flat sheet, boom, above it. Superior is thoracic cavity, inferior is abdominal pelvic, and abdominal pelvic will divide up into your abdominal cavity and your pelvic cavity. So abdominal has all your guts, not really that well protected, right? Because you can punch me in the belly and you'll hurt me more than you'll hurt your hand, but don't do that. I don't think I'd like it. And then the pelvic cavity, which is a little more protected and has your bladder and internal organs for reproduction, like the uterus and the ovaries, and some of the male, like the prostate gland, some of the pathways is in the pelvic cavity. Now, is it only serous membranes? Okay, I guess it's just serous membranes. We're going to learn about different membranes in the body, but right now, for some reason, we're learning about serous membranes, and serous membranes are in enclosed body cavity. So within the thoracic and abdominal body cavity, so it's within them, they're enclosed. In these cavities, in a serous membrane is two-layered. So it has two layers with liquid in the middle. Liquid, fluid, I guess is a better word for it. Fluid is between the two layers. And this fluid is called serous fluid. So why is this important? Well, this serous fluid is needed to reduce friction so things can slide around over itself and you don't have organs inside your body ripping and tearing because they're snagged on something. So when I have this serous membrane, there's two layers. There's the inner layer, the visceral. Inner layer usually lines organs. And then there's the outer layer, the parietal layer. And that is like lining, kind of like, it's more superficial. Ha ha ha, we'll use our fancy vocabulary. Lining the outer, we'll just say outer body cavity. And I'm out of room. Ha ha ha. Okay, and in the middle, between them, is the serous fluid. And the serous fluid is to reduce friction. We're going to have more specific, like around the heart, there's a pericardial membrane, and that's pericardial fluid, but that's in the middle between the two layers. So, you know, depending on where you are, this fluid might have a more specific name, but that's all that's going on about. Oh, okay, so let's see, look what we have here. So in my thoracic cavity here, I have two lungs. Each lung has its own serous membrane. Is called the pleura, and there's the outer parietal pleura stuck to the chest wall. There's the inner visceral pleura stuck to the lungs. That's why I'm like, and then obviously there's pleural fluid, serous fluid in the middle. Okay, and then the same thing is around the heart. The heart, like I said, has a pericardial sac. Oops, stop. And the parietal is the outer layer, the visceral is the inner layer attached to the heart, and in the middle you have pericardial fluid. And if that gets low, you have like friction, you have a rub, and it's not comfortable. It's not comfortable for the patient. Oh, so this is just looking at it from a different orientation, where we've taken this gentleman and we've done a transverse section, cutting him into a superior and an inferior section, a top and a bottom. You can use the fancy words. You don't need to. It's all good. Oh, so inside the body cavity, so we had pericardium as one of our serous membranes. We had the pleura as another serous membrane. These are in the thoracic cavity. But then we've got in the abdominal cavity a whole ginormous serous membrane. It's called the peritoneum. And that kind of holds your organs in place. It's where your muffin top exists. And covers most of, oh, that should have an S at the end. Most of the abdominal organs are contained in the peritoneum. However, you have a few that are outside in the back. And outside in the back, When they're not contained in the peritoneum, they're called retroperitoneal. And retroperitoneal organs include kidneys. So your kidneys are outside to the back. Includes part of the small intestine called the duodenum. That is also retroperitoneal. I feel like the pancreas. I think it's just kidneys. I don't know. I feel like now I want to look that up. Somebody look that up real quick. Is the pancreas retroperitoneal? I'm going to look it up on my phone right now because you guys can give me 2 seconds because you're not in the class to look it up for me and tell me what the answer is. Let's see. Duodenum, descending colon, some of the pancreas, I guess, is retroperitoneal according to some little quick thing I just did. Okay. All right. So the last little orientation we have is like slicing and dicing of the body and cutting the abdomen, nothing else, just the abdomen into quadrants. So we can do quadrants where it's just 4 parts, or you can slice it into 9 different sections. If you're a nursing student, you'll have to know the 9 regions, but we're not nursing students. If you're a nursing student, this class doesn't count for the type of program, so you're in the wrong class. Sorry if you just found that out. Anyway, so when you do that, now look, you cut it into a left and a right, right? Because we have this line and it's a left and a right. And then you cut it into an upper and a lower. But do you see how this right isn't your right? It's my right. It's the person's right because this is his right hand when he's in the anatomical position. So, and then you just go, hey, what do I see in these quadrants? Well, hey, I see a gallbladder and a whole lot of liver in the right upper quadrant. In the left upper quadrant, I see a whole lot of stomach and large intestine, small intestine, a little bit of liver. But then what you also have in the right lower quadrant, that's maybe something you guys are aware of, is you have this little guy here called the appendix, right? So if you are having pain in your right lower quadrant, could be your appendix. You EMTs already know all that. And then in your left lower quadrant, looks like you just got a whole lot of intestines and intestines and intestines. Nothing all that interesting, unless you're having an intestinal disorder. All right, so I'm only talking about the quadrants. I'm not going into these 9 regions. You can read about that more in the book if you want. What do we got here? Medical imaging? Yeah. But look, I just had my mammogram. It's a rather unpleasant experience. That could be me. It's not me. What else do we have? Oh, bone density. Yeah, I got to check out my bone density and see how my calcium levels are doing. And my bones are falling apart because I'm getting old. What else do we have? We have x-rays that'll detect, I don't know. There's x-rays. What is this thing in the really tiny writing? I can't read what it is. Oh, radio. No. Oh, it's cut out. I don't know. Oh, look, a barium contrast x-ray checking out cancer of the ascending colon. Oh, so they're pointing at this little black guy here in his large intestine. That looks like a bummer. Oh, and then we have, look at that ginormous kidney stone in this guy's kidney. Oh my gosh, ouch, chihuahua. I've never really looked at these. And now I am. Oh, but I've been talking for a while. Oh, so here, they talk about them all. CAT scans. You guys can check it out. And I've loaded that. Oh, there you go. That's a endoscopy, like a colonoscopy, looking on the inside. That looks very healthy. That looks good. What else we have? Oh, checking out the brain. And oh, I'm going to just call the ball on that, not save any of those inky notations. And oops, hold on. I hit the wrong button. Okay. So we have finished chapter 1, putting the pen down because I'm just going to get in trouble with it anyway. I swear I'm going to stop talking in a second. Let's go to Wiley Plus just for a quick second. Here we go. So chapter 1, you have found these lectures. So here's a PowerPoint. Here's the lectures. And you still have to work through this material, even though you've listened to me talk for 3 lectures. You have one, you can just do the concept check, or you can, play around and explore these concepts. So we had the body systems, the levels of organization, living things, homeostasis, and there's a whole lot with homeostasis because that's a really important concept. I'm not going to talk about it 5 times. You can listen to it 5 times. There's negative feedback. There's animations. There's positive feedback. Animation and assignments. Okay? And now we've just talked about the basic anatomical terminology. And you have a discussion board posting that you have to do. And you have Chapter 1 homework and Chapter 1 quiz. They're due on August 23rd. I'm not always going to keep going back to Wiley. I'm just doing this to get you used to what you have to do here. So again, take care, be well. I will see you Friday, and I'm looking very forward to it. All right, bye for now.